Hello, and in this session we're going to be investigating the theories of personality. So, what type of personality do you have? Are you somebody who gets aggressive, or are you quite a happy-go-lucky kind of person? Do you get really stressed, or do you find it really easy just to be able to kick back, relax, and let the world go by? The other thing we need to investigate is whether our personalities are something that's given to us at birth, or is it the fact that our environment is the main factor that affects our personality? So, let's start with a definition. Personality is seen as the sum total of an individual's characteristics which make the human unique. Now, let's look at some of the theories. So there are three main theories that we're going to look at linked to personality. They are trait personality theory, social learning, and the interactionist theory of personality. So, trait personality suggests that we are born with our personality traits. So, apparently, according to this theory, if you are aggressive from birth, then that's the personality trait that you would follow through your life. Or if you're sensitive, these are your personality traits. So that seems relatively restrictive, but where do they come from? So, according to the theory, they're inherited from our genes, and the issue is that they're stable and enduring, and they're not easily changeable. So therefore, you're going to see those characteristics in all aspects of your life, and arguably all through your life. So, what are you like when you're at work? Are you the same as when you're at home or when you're rested? Are you the same in both those situations as you are if you're taking part in sports or leisure activities? Are you generally a controlling type of person? So therefore you could say that controlling is a personality trait. Alright, so that's the trait theory overall. Now let's look at some of the studies that have been taking place linked to trait theory. So one of those is the concept of a type A and type B personality, and this was a study by Giordano, and it's called the narrow band theory. So for this theory, it suggested that if you have a type A personality, you exhibit behaviour that shows a lack of patience, but a strong urge for competition, a high desire to achieve goals, and are able to work very quickly but are prone to stress. And the other end of that spectrum, we have less prone to stress, quite prefer working at their own pace, desire to achieve, non-competitive, but exhibit signs of patience if you're a type B personality. Now, we're not suggesting that one is better than the other. What we're trying to do is just determine how can that predict or support our understanding of personality in relation to sports. Well, it's inconclusive, and there in itself is the answer. There's no real evidence to suggest that a type A or type B personality is better in certain sports. But there are certain components, for example a strong desire to succeed. Would that be better for this person who has to take a penalty? Or would you prefer a type B personality who's less prone to stress? So you can see how either of those could work in that particular situation, but what we're doing is linking the theory to sport and sport behaviour. So let's look at another one. So this theory, and remember we're still talking about the trait theory, was a theory that's been put forward by Eysenck, and it's called the personality types. So Eysenck suggested that we can work along two continuums between different components. So the first two components are whether you have a stable personality trait or an unstable or neurotic personality. So let's put those into context and give some examples. So if you were to have a stable personality, let's say a woman's in charge of a football team, one of her players receives a yellow card. Now, because they have a stable personality and because of their type of personality, they remonstrate or argue with the referee. Now, the following week, when another player receives a yellow card, because of the stable personality, they will usually exhibit, according to the theory, the same type of behaviour. Now, if somebody has an unstable or neurotic personality, the theory suggests that one week they may remonstrate and argue with the referee, and then the following week, if the same situation were to arise, let's say again the yellow card for the player, that they would exhibit different type of response. So this time they're saying no problem and they felt it was a fair decision. So it's changeable, it's unstable, it's a neurotic behaviour trait. So is this person exhibiting stable or neurotic behaviour? Remember, we're looking for either consistent or changeable behaviour in the similar or same situation. Have a look and see what you think.
Are you kidding me? Open your eyes. What on earth do you think you're doing? Jesus Christ, rubbish! Come on, Rep, pay attention. All right, fair enough. All right, boys, yeah, not a bad decision, fair enough. All right, come on, boys, let's work back. Next one then.
So clearly neurotic because the behaviour changed in the same situation. Okay, let's move on. Now, let's have a look at the other continuums that Eysenck also identified as part of the model, and that was extroversion and introversion. So do remember that you don't have to be at the absolute extremes of either of these. You don't have to be a complete extrovert and introvert. You can have elements of both to a certain extent. But in principle, an extrovert is somebody who prefers to be in a group. They're more outgoing. They affiliate to other people and therefore like to be with others, and they're quite sociable. Now, for an introvert, they usually prefer to work alone and they're less likely to affiliate with groups. They're not readily sociable. Now, don't think of that as a positive or negative. It's two different components. Where do they get their best work done? And it maybe as an extrovert they prefer to be with that group, but the introverts prefer to work on their own. Doesn't mean say that one is better than the other. Now, one way that we can explain the extroversion and introversion is via the reticular articulation system, which takes place in the brain, and it's linked to arousal. So let's look at the extrovert. So an extrovert is seen as having an RAS that inhibits or reduces the effects of external sensory stimulus, which leads to the areas of the brain experiencing low levels of arousal. Therefore, the extrovert seeks more external stimulation to achieve a high level of internal arousal. But the introvert is said to have a high level of arousal naturally occurring within their brain, so tend to avoid external stimulation. Therefore, the introverts are more likely to work on their own or avoid social situations. So it's just about that in basic terms, that internal level of arousal that they have. And these are your personality traits, whether you're introverted or extroverted, stable or unstable. Alright, so let's move on to the next main theory, and this is the social learning theory. Those that do psychology will probably recognise this straight away. And this was a theory put forward by Bandura, who did a lot of experiments in relation to aggression and observing aggression. And it basically suggests that we learn by observing behaviour. Okay, so let's pause the coach there. Bandura noted that it's more likely that the assistant coach is now going to copy the behaviour of the lead coach, regardless whether it's negative or positive. So the observational learning is taking place because it's a significant other.
What are you doing? Pass the ball! Good job, Enoch. Kick out, move the ball,
So the behaviour has now been observed, therefore copied. So let's look at some of the main components of that. So it's considered to be unstable because obviously the environment is. So it's changeable through adapting to the environment. So you would change as your environment does, exactly as it says. So the behaviour is usually acquired through copying others, but once that behaviour is reinforced. And there's a key component, making sure that we reinforce the behaviour. So we observe and copy behaviour, and it's usually significant others, role models, and that could be players or of a successful, high status, high profile. And then if that behaviour is then reinforced, and coaches, this could be you as well, seen as a significant other, if you reinforce the behaviour that is seen. So that's the social learning theory. Right, let's look at the last theory then, and this is the interactionist theory. So this theory suggests that it's to do with the traits that you're born with and also the environment, and it was put forward by Hollander. And as it says there, it's a combination of those two. You may have certain personality traits, but then you are also going to change elements of your personality to a certain extent because of the environment. So let's say, for example, you love cricket. So when you're at cricket practice, you're really enthused, engaged, socially interactive, and very loud or vibrant, but when you leave cricket you may revert to a different type of personality, so therefore you may be shy and quiet. So you're changing your characteristics and your behavior per se because of the demands of the particular situation. And it might be that those are just perceived demands. You feel like you have to act in a certain way, but that's the interaction of the environment, but also your personality traits. So in summary, we have the trait, the observational, and the interactionist theories of personality. So what we'll do here, we'll just identify some of the main characteristics. So they're innate, it was put forward by Eisnick, they're stable, and the behavior is generalized, and there's an example there. Say for example you're aggressive in one situation, you're aggressive in all situations. So the social learning theory suggests that we learn by observation, and that if that behavior is then reinforced, that may become our behavior as well. And in a sporting example, it may be that you copy somebody's positive, but as a negative you may copy somebody's negative behavior. And lastly, we've got the interactionist, as we've just said, and that's a combination of the trait theory and also the interaction with the environment. So you may change depending on the environmental demands. Alright, so there's the three main theories, a brief overview of all of those. Hopefully that's going to be helpful. Do pause the video and go back at any other components that you're not sure of. And thanks very much for using Flip Teach.